A close friend of mine, who I trust is telling the truth, recently shared a story with me. I'm a huge skeptic of anything supernatural, but I can't come up with a logical explanation for this one, and I'm wondering what you all make of it. So, a while back, he was in a car crash. He was not inebriated at the time, and was the only person in the car. After the crash, he was able to unbuckle the seatbelt and get himself out of the car. He immediately went to medical services to get checked out. They got ready to do an x-ray, and when they removed his shirt, he had these two bruises, in the clear shape of hands. One was on his left shoulder, and the other on his right hip. The way they were positioned, it's as if someone grabbed him hard from behind and pulled him into the seat. The marks were so visible that the doctor examining him immediately asked if someone else was in the car with him, because he was convinced that they were made by someone grabbing him. At the time, my friend was very religious and explained it as a religious miracle, saving him in that crash. Since then, he stepped away from the church, but still cites this as one of his primary pieces of evidence that something supernatural could be out there. He still has an open mind. I got his permission to post this, and he's curious what you have to offer as a possible explanation. When I was about 10 years old, I would go to bed around 8:30 p.m. I used to fall asleep in my mom's bed. She had a TV in her room, so I would fall asleep to cartoons. And when she would come up to go to bed, she would wake me up and take me to my bed. One night, I was sleeping in my mom's bed, as per usual, and I woke up to the door opening. I didn't want to look up because I figured it was my mom, as it was just the two of us living at the house. I heard her walk toward the bed and stop. And there was a good 5 minutes or so before I heard the bed creak from her laying down. She lay down and put her arm around me. She never said anything, and neither did I, since I was half asleep. She didn't try to wake me up or move me to my room, so I just figured that she was letting me sleep in her room for the night. I drifted off. When I woke in the morning, I rolled over and saw that she was gone. I walked downstairs and saw her sleeping on the couch. The title screen for Pretty in Pink was playing on the TV in the background. She woke up and smiled and asked me what I wanted for breakfast. I told her that I'd just made myself a bowl of cereal. I headed to the kitchen and turned around to thank her for letting me sleep in her bed last night. She looked at me confused and said, "You didn't sleep in your room?" And I told her no. She said that she had fallen asleep on the couch. I told her that that was impossible, since she came into the room last night. She looked at me even more puzzled and said, "No, I've been down here the whole time." I kept telling her, "No, you lay down next to me, and I even remember you putting your arm around me and stroking my hair." She looked horrified. Again, we lived alone. My mom has no history of sleepwalking either. To this day, my mom and I are still freaked out by this, and don't really like to talk about it. Fortunately, it never happened again. I work overnights. My husband stays at home with my daughter. Last night, I left around 10 p.m., and around 12:30, my daughter messaged me and asked me if I was home. I told her I wasn't. She said that when she went to let the dogs out to go to the bathroom, she swore that she heard me calling her name from a distance out in the backyard. It really freaked her out, to the point that she was crying. She's usually very level-headed, and she never cries, so obviously it freaked me out too. I told her to wake my husband up and have him look around and to lock all the doors. She's never been one to lie about things. I don't know what it was, but she genuinely thought it was me. There aren't any women that live in our neighborhood that we know of. Our house was built in 1900, so we've had a few spooky things happen to us here and there. I'm not saying I think it was necessarily supernatural though, just very strange. Has anything like this ever happened to anyone else? About 7 years ago, I was in the northern tip of Michigan's Lower Peninsula, around the Pigeon River Forest area. I was driving around looking for my dad's old hunting camp, which was pretty deep in the woods, nothing but dirt roads and old logging trails. It was nearing sundown when I pulled over to try and figure out where I was. No cell coverage, so I was using a copy of an old map of the area. The woods up there are both beautiful and very dark due to the thickness of the tree coverage and a lot of dense foliage. I was sitting in my car studying my map when I noticed it had gotten very silent. For a few minutes, the birds and squirrels stopped chattering and singing, but I barely noticed. I was going to head back to town since it was starting to get dark. And that's when I became aware of movement in the woods just a few yards away. Something was scurrying through the field of tall ferns, heading toward the tree line nearby. It startled me, but I assumed it was probably a raccoon or a fox or something. I watched the thing moving through the ferns, curious if I could see what the animal was. It reached the trees and the movement stopped. I couldn't see anything, and after a minute, I gave up and went back to the map. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed something moving again at the tree line. When I looked, there was nothing, at first. Then, I gradually realized that one of what I thought was trees was actually a tall, dark creature, about 6 feet tall, and covered in what looked like short, dark, gray fur, like a rabbit. The body looked like a ferret or a weasel, very long and slim, with what appeared to be long, skinny arms or front legs, hanging down at the sides. The weirdest thing was the head. It was a flat head, like a snake's head. In fact, it was shaped very much like a hogshead snake. The thing appeared to be staring at me, but I couldn't see a face. No eyes or mouth that I could see. There were some sort of complications around the face, like bulges, which were also covered with short gray hair. I stared at it for maybe 5 seconds before it ducked down and disappeared into the dark woods. The really weird thing? For about 10 minutes, I didn't think anything about it. Like, nothing at all. I just kind of started driving, found my way back to the highway, and that's when the strangeness of the experience finally hit me. I was pretty freaked out. I told one of my friends, but no one else. Needless to say, I haven't been back to the forest, and I have no plans to. The only thing I can think of is there are some river otters in the area due to the abundance of lakes and rivers. I've seen them before up north, and they can get surprisingly big, 5 or 6 feet. But they don't have snake heads, and they definitely don't have faces. So maybe an injured otter? Or one with an incredible mutation? If so, I still don't know how it managed to move so fast. It shot through the ferns very quickly.